Doctors, nurses, and hospital staff of Reddit, what are your experiences? Funny, sad, horrible, with people waking from anesthesia? NSW. A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. Had a patient in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we place a speculum, think ball gag, but a metal ring instead of a ball, in the mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they are under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole aura erupted in laughter. Well, at least we know he's prudent. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she has always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This was probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day, was completely with it and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I had an 8-year-old kid in the or say you mother suckers right before she fell asleep. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations and I had an old guy wake up and the first thing he asked was do I still have my balls and I told him yep, both of them and he said both, or you guys are great. I like to imagine he only had one ball and was thrilled to hear that you gave him a new one. Not a hospital staff but my great grandfather had surgery one time and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a Nazi POW camp. He recognized me and told me I had to help him escape by killing the guards, nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in he was calm and kept motioning with his head at her to me and finally looked at me and said kill her. Now, she always came back with another male nurse after that. Nurse here, this really big, hairy Turkish guy, whom I've never met before, told me how much he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male BTW. He wanted to kiss you. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam. He was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told her that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed it restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. That's a badass right there. I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7. I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cue the following conversation. Me. Why are the Rugrats on? Doctor, you woke up earlier and said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry. Me. Why did I want to be angry? Doctor, you said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time. Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in bed, hospital room, waiting for surgery. They already gave me meds to calm me but they knocked me out. 2 nurses come in to move me to a gurney but they were small and I'm big, they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs saying you're snoring. Roll over, and I rolled right onto the gurney. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been on a ward etc prior to the operation. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue. My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed repeatedly muttering, where are his legs? Where are his legs? I always cross my legs when I lay down and apparently I must have done this as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled "they're right here" and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mum was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my balls are itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down to my skin so I can scratch my balls. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down an excess of smooth skin. Then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that someone has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "AWW mum, they've shaved my pubes. I'm no happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's no right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified and she's trying to get me to calm down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time it was a serious issue. So I'm on a tech, and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time, I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went in to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation. So, with the EMTs standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. Then, she queefs. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her, and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps and then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a flirty voice, "You boys ever seen a black coochie before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. Since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom, and I'm forced to try to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the air. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 plus. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you just come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a three-way with a 50-year-old 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moment of my life. How nice that he wanted to include you though. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued. My wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well, and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have lots of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a frickin' sloth in here. How did we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off of me so I could go to sleep, and I yelled, "Whoa there, missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred. "My name is Worcestershire sauce." "No, wait, that's not a cool name. My name is Shark." My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes, she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his dong in my mouth." It was awkward. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth thief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. I had surgery on my wrist and came out of anesthesia screaming my balls hurt. The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said my balls hurt. He replied, "Dude, you had wrist surgery. No one touched your balls." I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected in recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed, and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back on the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. Came out of anesthetic and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me all about post-op care. She says, now this is going to be a pain in the ass. And I said, if that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure, it was a nose operation. The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse not so amused. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently, before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk? The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone asked him in a haze. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to sleep. A friend was in a car crash. Pretty bad, he was in a coma for 2 months. He had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on he would reach up and grab her breast, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about, he did not believe us. So he asked her and she confirmed it. Said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. I was working in the pediatric and sedating a skater kid 14 or 15. We are talking more a wannabe suburban kid rather than a punk. Kinda kid that obviously joined a frat in college. His mom is there in the room as he starts waking up once we had his wrist set and in the cast. His mom is typical well-to-do suburban mom who spends lots of time at yoga and PTA meetings, that is. Not trashy at all, and family was likely from a well-to-do part of town. My buddy, who is fairly hairy on his arms etc, reached across his upper chest to grab an IV line. Kid was half asleep, raised his head up with his eyes still closed and licked my buddy's arm with this exaggerated lick like it was an ice cream cone. Kid flops his head back onto the pillow and his mom just looks mortified in the 2-3 seconds that pass before he slurs out, man, I sure do love to lick some pee. His mom immediately turned bright red and walked out of the room, and we all busted out laughing except the guy who got licked. The doc was this young petite girl and she said she peed herself a little, she was laughing so hard. For months we would give that garlic motions in the air when we passed him in the hall and putting Rolling Stone stickers on his locker etc. I still give him crap about that from time to time. My favorite is to catch him chatting or something standing at the desk and to lean over and sniff his forearm and ask if he has been fishing. Not a nurse, but I have a good one. It's been 15 years and I'm still horrified when I think about it. I have to preface this story by saying that I have a super conservative, girl next door type of personality. I am shy, somewhat of an introvert, and most definitely never want to be the center of attention on purpose. I went in for a colonoscopy with a yum yum juice that made me forget everything that happened, although I vaguely remember talking and hearing laughter. When I woke up, people were smirking and glancing at each other, trying to suppress their laughter. I asked if something happened and the staff reassured me that everything was good. So when the doctor came in to talk to me before I was released, I asked him if something funny had happened. He reassured me that I had a very normal procedure and then told me that sometimes the medication caused people to lower their inhibitions, but that the effect wore off very quickly, as does the medication. I asked him what he meant by lowering their inhibitions and he paused again and reassured me that it happens to a lot of people. So yeah, I spent my entire colonoscopy talking dirty to my doctor and his tools. I never went back to that doctor again. I had to get hardware installed in my leg for a nasty bone break at an overseas base. A few days later, my buddy and I were having lunch on base. A group of women came in and sat down at the table next to us and we struck up a conversation. One of them asked what I had gotten done. I was in a huge cast and on crutches. I tell her the procedure. She gets a funny look on her face and asked when it was done. I tell her the date. She immediately starts laughing and tells her friends, "This is the guy." Now they're all howling with laughter. It took a while to tell the story because they're in tears from laughing. Apparently, when I was coming out of sedation, I grabbed a corpsman's ass and hung on for dear life. The woman I was currently talking to at the restaurant. I just wanted to crawl into a hole when I heard the story. I was the patient, but I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mom shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her, but couldn't get my mouth to work, so I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs, 3 nurses walked in that were rather attractive. He looks up with his wife in the room and says, if I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big dong. Once I woke up asking if the ends justify the means. Once I went under while reminding all the women in the room that the room is very cold and they shouldn't judge. I was the patient. I was waking up from having my wisdom teeth pulled, and apparently I kept telling the nurse how beautiful my fiancée was and couldn't quit gushing about her while she was standing in the room. Pretty romantic, right? I then asked the nurse for a threesome. Not a doctor or nurse. When my sister was 16, she had back surgery to repair a ruptured disc in her lower back. Apparently, the meds that they gave her before she was put under gave her low enough inhibitions that instead of counting backward from 10, she started belting out the lyrics to Roxanne. The staff later told my mom that not only were they amazed that someone that young knew the lyrics, but also that way that she started singing was one of the funniest things they had seen in an hour. After waking up from my wisdom tooth surgery, I remember her asking my mom, I didn't fart, did I? I had a bunch of gas before the surgery and now it's gone. I hope I didn't fart in front of the cute nurse. Cute nurse is behind me during the whole speech. I woke up in a recovery room after having my wisdom teeth out and no one was in there with me, so I thought it would be a good idea to get up and have a look around. Apparently I had been awake a minute before and asked the doctor for some water, but when she left to get it I went in and out of consciousness and forgot all about it. They were pretty terrified when I just up and vanished. A few months later my brother had his wisdom teeth out. We left the surgeons with no issue, but on the drive home my brother lost his crap. I had to take a circuitous route home because my brother wanted to see the circus. Every house we drove past he was pointing out imaginary animals and giggling hysterically. He was 17 at the time. Anesthesia apparently does weird crap to us. You have been visited by the wealth rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.